bill, and we wanted to get, to your point, more feedback from it so that we could revise it and amend it, etc., and maybe that will happen this session. On the second part of the question, how do we allocate the money, if not all back to the people, and I certainly get that. I mean, that is an easy, clear message. Everybody's going to understand that. We sent a certain percentage, small percentage, to transportation. I think it was 10%. We sent a small percentage to the development of clean energy technologies, another 10%. We sent the bulk of the 80% remaining back to the people, as I mentioned, or income tax credits, income tax reduction, and the increase in personal exemption, and then a small percentage to the business community. Those were just my ideas in slight consultation with Senator Mike Barrett, but I'm not going to be doing this going forward. Mike is, maybe others are. I know they're looking for a House sponsor, and those percentages are all up to debate. So weigh in.
My name is Lisa Selberg. I feel like I want to ask. It's a dumb question. So in the presentation that you've been giving, it's been largely in terms of, okay, we're going to tax the fossil fuel companies, fantastic. Or we're going to tax the emissions, fantastic. And then it sounds like, well, it's all going to come back virtually to the people who are going to have to be paying whatever increases in prices go on. I think, well, why would we bother to do this? Okay, if it's just kind of a trade, you're just kind of making things high, cost more, and then you're going to get some little benefit that allows you to pay for it. Okay, it doesn't feel like it's changing the world, So there's this other part, which is, okay, where are you getting the incentives to really fundamentally change how we're organized right now? Out of the way people are talking about it right now, I don't see that. That's the sort of mystery. That's the kind of magic, that has to somehow come out of this. I mean, because that is okay, let's punish fossil fuel companies, but then it gets very complicated.
Right. That's a perfect example of how hard this is to understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, okay, if we can have some, we hired a company and they told us that 10,000 jobs created. Do I believe that? I mean, I don't really know. So, this is what I want to hear, something that allows you to really believe that there's going to be something that's going to
James is about to, I think, approach the economics of this question, but I just wanted to say that I get asked some version of that question basically every time I talk about this. So I agree, this is a very core thing that we need to be able to explain.
Yeah, I think it is, and I've been asked it many times as well. The key thing to understand is that what people pay is based on their use of the scarce resource, which is how much their carbon footprints, how much fossil fuel they burn. What they receive back is not based on how much you burn as an individual. It's your share of the revenue generated by everybody who's paying to use the carbon sink. So it's an example of what sometimes, not to lapse in the economies, but it's called a fee-based system. You pay fees for your use of a common resource based on the extent of your use, and you receive the money back. Sorry?
I don't understand.
If you're paying $5,000 to heat your house, you may get $3,000 back.
But if you're paying $1,000 to heat your house, you still get $3,000 back. Right? So here's an example. In Silicon Valley, there are office buildings where they have limited parking space. Right? 1,000 people work in the building. There's parking space for 500 people. What do? Right? Well, you don't make it free to park there. Right? There's limited parking space. You charge people to park there. That's the fee. Right? If you drive to work and pay, you have to pay to park. Right? At the end of the month, all the money that's collected from charging for the parking is distributed to all the 1,000 people who work in the building on an equal per person basis. So the person who drives to work every day in a single occupancy vehicle pays more than they get back. The people who carpool might get back more than they pay. And the people who take public transport or bike to work, they don't pay anything, and they get their share back as well. So everybody's got an incentive to economize on their use of the scarce resource, that incentive comes from paying to use it. The owners of the resource are everybody, not just the ones who are using it the most. That's the basic. This is paying to park carbon in the atmosphere.
Hi, I'm Marty Nathan. What about make polluters pay? And second, I really want to encourage not just the rebate per capita. I think that's really a fantastic idea, but the other 20%. If people cannot afford to drive their cars as much, then they must have decent public transit. If people cannot afford to heat their houses, use as much, whatever they're using, electricity or whatever, as they were using before, they must have decent insulation, solar panels, all the things that we need. We have to build the infrastructure in order for people who are already living on the edge to be able to just survive until they can get their earned income tax credit.
Thank you, Marty. I totally agree. And I should say that there is some controversy over this point. There are a lot of people who feel very strongly that the government shouldn't use any of the money for infrastructure. They should send it all directly back to the public. That's an issue that I think if you feel strongly about, as Representative Conroy said, definitely weigh in, because I think legislators are listening on this point, and this is a good time for influence as to what it looks like.
My name's Ann Perkins. I don't know anything about this new person that's going to be our governor. However, I will remind you that Mitt Romney did not increase taxes, but man, did he increase fees. Every single fee or license, if you were licensed not just for drivers, but any, in your trade or whatever. That's how he got money. So, maybe Republicans aren't afraid of fees. I have a concern because I'm under the impression that in the last legislative session, there was kind of a pull and tug and pull between the divestment from fossil fuels for the state pension and the carbon bill. That it was like, well, we can't have two environmental bills in one legislative session. So my question is really probably for Ellen. Do you think that that's a real concern?
No. There was a good op-ed in the Globe today from Harvard law students who were suing the university because they were
about divesting from fossil fuels.
My name is Mark Hockhowell. So you're talking about taxing carbon, oil, coal, and you said you can't figure out how to tax methane. Why don't you tax meat?
Oh.
Methane, why would you tax meat?
And milk.
And milk. Animal products.
That's
The source of the methane, which is a bigger contributor to global warming than carbon dioxide.
That's a great question, and I think, in the long run, that's something that we absolutely need to address. I think right now we are focused on energy emissions, which, is a lot of our emissions, and it's taking on a lot. So we haven't gotten into the conversation about corporate agriculture, but, I think we eventually definitely need to go there. So I think, and on methane from natural gas, that's one of the difficult things is that methane leaks from natural gas pipelines, it leaks from natural gas wells. It's hard to figure out exactly where the natural gas is coming from, figure out exactly how much methane is leaking from these pipelines. So, I think there are strategies that we can use to get at it, but it is a more complex calculation that we're going to have to figure out. So I totally agree, methane needs to be a part of the conversation on the agriculture side and on the chemical.
That's what you're waiting for. I have a 5-year-old son, and I'd like the earth to be here for him when he grows up, and we don't have time to wait.
Hi, my name is Nick Kleiner. I was just wondering, because in this past election out in Washington State, I don't know if everyone in the audience is aware, billionaire Tom Steyer spent a lot of money, trying to elect a favorable legislature to pass I don't know the specific, but a similar sort of carbon tax bill, carbon fee and rebate bill, and with the governor who supported it and failed to do so pretty substantially. And I'm wondering how you guys think that influences this debate and what lessons it has for this campaign.
I think it means we have to make this so people can understand it.
Yeah, and somewhat more optimistically, there was also a bunch of money spent in Oregon trying to create a favorable legislature for a similar proposal. Both Washington and Oregon are paying a lot of attention to this policy because of the proximity to British Columbia. And I think that there is a pretty good chance in Oregon. So, you know, it's not all bad news coming out of the Pacific Northwest.
My name is Tom Stokes, and my question has to do with the messaging issue. And it seems to me that the great opportunity that a carbon fee or tax offers is that it's an opportunity for everybody to be both part of the problem and the solution. And I think that if you're directing the saying we're making the oil companies and the big polluters, they're the ones who are going to pay, you're kind of undermining that opportunity. And everybody knows that if the oil companies are taxed, we're all going to be taxed in terms of higher pump tax. You know, so I think the way Jim phrased it was really very elegant and very convincing that we really. Those people who are careful about their consumption will come out ahead. But to say that, not to acknowledge that we're all going to have to pay, I think could backfire. But to emphasize that we're all in this together as part of the solution, and have that be a basis for even community dialogues to talk about how we can arrive at a common understanding might be a way to approach it.
Well said. Thank you.
More questions?
That was supposed to be a question, by the way.
Well, let me just say, Tom, I tend to agree with you that it would be disingenuous to think that the companies are going to be the ones who pay, and that this is not going to be passed along to consumers. We know that it will be, just as when OPEC raises cuts production of oil and raises the prices, ExxonMobil passes that on to the consumers. I think we should, confront that squarely. That said, when one talks about polluters, if one uses that, I'm thinking about Ellen's, point about what words to use. When one talks about polluters, right? Well, is ExxonMobil the polluter, or am I the polluter when I buy their gas and pump it? I think it's kind of like both. And polluter, in a way, covers both. So let me suggest language. Let me suggest you put this in your focus group.
Yeah.
Dan, when you do this. I looked actually in preparation for this. I looked at how question 1 was phrased in the short version, right? So I kind of modeled this on the way they phrase it, right? How do you phrase it? So it starts out as a yes vote would, right? That's how it starts. So here's what I would suggest. This is something to test, right? A yes vote would send quarterly carbon dividend payments to all residents of Massachusetts, funding by charging polluters for their carbon pollution. I think that's what we're talking about, right? And it puts the carbon dividend up front, right? It doesn't put the tax up front. Rebate sounds, to me, it's always sound a little tacky, like you get a cent in your coupon. It's your dividend. It comes with your ownership of the common resource. So I would say, this is why you guys can tweet it. A yes vote would send quarterly carbon dividend payments, or you could just say quarterly dividend payments, to all residents of Massachusetts, funded by charging polluters for their carbon pollution. I think that's basically what it is.
What I really like about this conversation, including your question, Tom, is that this is all stuff that is like exactly things that we've been thinking about and wrestling with, including the idea of how do we get the dividend up front so that that's getting more of the attention, and including this question of, you know, how much do we make this about common responsibility versus oil and gas companies. These are difficult questions where, I like that one right there.
So here's an idea.
Yeah.
Make a bumper sticker
Yeah.
that says, I want my carbon dividend. And people say, what is a carbon dividend? And then they think about it in the news, and they go, oh, that's what they're talking about.
Wow. My question is, do you think people know what the word dividend means?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
We wrestled with that question too. And I did love, for those of you who are in New York City, Citizens Climate Lobby, which has been the organization very focused on this policy on the national level. Our organization actually begins with volunteers from the Citizens Climate Lobby. They were holding signs that showed a check. Their whole sign was a big check, and it showed how much their study showed that people could get in a check in the mail. I thought that was kind of a clever idea. So a lot of these ideas are working.
The annual payments that every man, woman, and child in Alaska receives annually, which are about $2,000 a year per person, are called dividends. And the people of Alaska figure out what a dividend is. A lot. They like them a lot. So I think people could ultimately get it.
You could just call it
Pay attention.
Oh, payments. Money.
payment is something we all do.
Right.
I think dividend feels sort of like a treat. It's like investors get dividends. So I think it feels sort of gift-like more than a payment. I don't know.
Well, a dividend comes from your ownership of an asset, right? This is an asset that we all own in common. That's kind of what I like.
Where'd you get that sticker?
Citizens Climate Lobby is doing exactly this on a national level, and I've just gotten involved in this, and we started a local chapter in Western Massachusetts just this month. And I'm very excited to hear about the state initiative, and I want to work with you on that, on both of them.
That's great, and we would love to work with you in both the Citizens Climate Lobby organizations in both Boston and Metro West are organizations that we've been working closely with.
And
So
the Remy
having
report.
one out here would be great.
Can you identify
Your
yourself?
story is also.
Yeah, and the Remy report, we helped fix them up with that. So we did the initial Remy report, and then we got Citizens Climate Lobby to do a second one.
So that people who are interested in my contact you, could you identify yourself?
Yeah, my name is Richard Prey, P-R-E-E, and I'm in Ashfield, and I could leave a card with you. The thing that is so wonderful about Citizens Climate Lobby, and that I see that is really being generated right here, right now, is the idea that we need to work with legislators. We need to think about what are they looking for, what do they need, what language makes sense to them. This question was fabulous. I get this all the time. We need to find ways of communicating this and have lots of patience with people and do more listening than talking. So they have a very, very good organization and a great method of talking to people, bipartisan, not assuming that we all think the same on all of the issues. I think we have a tendency to do that in Western Massachusetts. One of the most amazing things at the June conference in Washington, D.C. was the address by Bob Engels. And he, gosh, the nicest guy. He talked about how he became converted to climate change. Before that, anything Al Gore said was horrible. But he went on the scuba dive in the reef, and he saw the fish, and he saw how the reef was being destroyed. And he's been a tireless champion for climate for changing, rolling back the climate scenario. And we were all feeling really good about it. He says, lest you think we agree on everything. I'm pro-gun, I'm anti-abortion, I'm against gay marriage. I went, I just couldn't believe it. It was like, but that's because we think everyone agrees with us on these things. So we need to be careful when we talk to people, not to assume anything. Just stay on the message. The message speaks for itself. You've done a great job.
Maybe I just say a couple of words about next steps and to follow up. So let me just thank you all so much for coming out and for this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much to the panelists, especially Tom for coming all the way out from Eastern Mass. And thank you, Ellen, for your support in all of this. I just want to close by saying a few words about Climate Exchange's strategy on this. And you know, when I think about what our organizing strategy is, I think about it primarily in terms of something, a quote that I heard from Barney Frank. This goes back a few years, maybe some of you have heard this before, but he said, I first pay attention to an issue when I hear 6 people in my district, 6 of my constituents call my office and tell me about it, tell me that they care about it. And that, I think, is really what we need to be doing right now, is going deep into the state, not just in this area, but also in this area, and finding those people, those 6 people that we're going to be able to call on to be able to say, hey, we got a vote coming up, call your legislator, or hey, you know, this is a new target for us that, you know, hasn't been informed about this issue before. But how can we, you know, find those people who are going to be able to make those calls, get that meeting, talk to their legislators about it. So we'd love to be able to get people in this room who are interested in this to help us out in that way. Reach out to your friends and neighbors, tell more people about it. I think we got a great story. I think our strongest ally right here is that this is a good idea. And you know, if we explain it to people, I think that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to listen to it. So thank you all so much.